Well, hello, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and thank you for taking some time to meet with us and learn some interesting information about becoming a Google school. I'm Ernie Delgado, co-founder and CEO of Beyond Technology Education, providing consulting services for K-12 schools around the world at this point. On the webinar with me is Dr. Malia Hoffman, who will be presenting the information today, and Susie Carpenter, who is one of our client coordinators here at Beyond Technology Education. Real quick, if you take a look at the panel, those of you who may not be familiar with GoToWebinar, there is a couple areas you might want to be just be aware of them. One of them is the question area. If you have any questions, we're going to handle all of those at the end. Dr. Hoffman will spend a few minutes, about 5 or 8 minutes at the end of the webinar to cover any relevant and important questions. So please put them in there, and then I will be able to get those questions answered for you. Also, there's a handout section. Please hold off on that until the end. We do have some information we're going to let you take with you, PDF versions. If you have any problems with any of these tools, please use the chat box to communicate with us, and we'll go from there. So with that, with that out of the way, it's interesting. This morning I read an article about a school district who's actually selling their iPads to purchase Chromebooks. And that's just, that was an interesting article to me. But there's a big trend of schools going towards this environment for a variety of reasons. One, is you can't beat the price of a Chromebook and what you get for that price. And two, the fact that all their applications and tools, their Google Apps for Education, are free. So it makes it there's a real strong case and argument for at least investigating what Google has to offer for your classrooms. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Dr. Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman is an assistant professor at Concordia University in Irvine, California. I met Dr. Hoffman a couple years back at a conference, and she does a lot of work in professional development, and in particular, integrating technology into the classroom and how teachers use technology effectively. And her research was fascinating to me, and some of the things that she's identified. And so she's really a leader in this area. Dr. Hoffman, I'm going to go ahead and present or change the presenter over to you so that you could take over. And without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Yes, as Ernie said, I have done a lot with integrating technology into the classrooms. I've been working on the TPAC model as far as a model for integrating technology, focusing on the tools rather, or not taking the focus from the tools and focusing on the pedagogy and also the content, and then deciding on the tools from there. So you've come today to talk about how to become a Google school and what goes into that. So thank you again for attending. Here's our outline of what we'll cover today. We're talking about 5 simple steps in how to make that transition. So you have to first make the decision and find out whether or not it's appropriate for you. And then there's the transition process. And then something that I find always or often gets left to the wayside is the training. And then how to implement that, and then the final step is to model, train, and repeat. So we're going to start off with a poll right away, asking you what productivity tools you're currently using. So Ernie, would you post that, please?
Folks, go ahead and choose one of the options there. We want to kind of take a poll and see what's everyone using. Right now, I'm looking at about 70%. That's just dropped a little bit. Microsoft seems to be the leader here at about 30%. Give it a couple more seconds here. They're still coming in. 81% voted. Is everybody going to get a chance to vote? Hopefully 86% of you. It looks like the leader at this point is Microsoft. Second is Google Apps, but not a Google School. So that's a good group, Malia. They know apps, they just don't know how to get to the next step of becoming a school. The third is Google Apps and a Google School. So some of you are already doing this. You just want to make sure you're doing it right, or seeing if there's some new ideas. And then a very small percentage of you are Apple schools, 10%. We got about 95% of you voted and then 5% of you are other. Now, I'm always curious what that other might be. If you have a chance, can you type it into the chat box? I'm just curious what other systems are out there. I'm going to close out the poll. 93% of you voted, and so it's 41% Microsoft. 29% of you are Google apps, but not schools. 15% of you are Google apps and a Google school, and then there's 5% that are other. Okay, that's good information. Thank you. Back to
It
you,
is good
Dr.
information, and if you haven't had any experience using the Google apps, you'll find that if you've already used Microsoft apps, that is a pretty easy transition of knowledge to those other tools. So step one is making that decision. So with any change in your organization, the decision should not be taken lightly. And how you make that decision and what your role will depend on how you proceed and go forward. So then we do have another poll, and that is asking to find out who we have here with us, what your role is in making this decision. Are you an IT administrator or teacher? So Ernie, will you post that, please?
Posted. All right, we're not going to over poll you, so don't don't worry. We want to make sure that we're providing the right information and make sure that we're covering all of our bases, because every one of these roles has kind of a different perspective on how this process should be handled, and maybe different priorities. So it looks like a good half of you are administrators. Already up to 80%. But look, you guys are good. Now that you know that there's polls involved, you're right on the money. Okay, yeah, about half of you are administrators, a quarter of you are teachers, 20% are IT people. So that's interesting to know. Um, you IT people out there, I think you'll see that. And I'm not sure that Dr. Hoffman's going to get into it, but administrating Chromebooks with Google Apps for Education is so much easier than any other platform. It's ridiculously easy. That we're not going to. That might be a good topic for another webinar, Malia.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is good information. I'm going to go to. We got 93% of you. I'm going to close out this poll. Yeah, so 44% administrators, 23% of you are teachers, 21% of you are IT people. We have 7% that are technology coaches, and 5% are others. Again, I'm curious who your others are. We're curious if parents came on here. Let me know. Please in the chat section, let me know who's here. Go ahead, Malia.
Thank you. Okay, well that's helpful moving forward, so that will help me gear this towards the majority if I can, and I'll still mention the others. But you also need to consider the why. The why is always important when making a decision. Oftentimes we get sidetracked by the tools and the bright shininess of the tools. Like Ernie mentioned, the school that is giving up their iPads for Chromebooks, I think they might have gotten distracted and missed that why part. So you want to make sure that choosing Google for your school is appropriate, because it's more of a productivity and a collaborative type of tool that you can use with your teachers and your students. And it's definitely not as, even though they call them Google Apps for Education, or GAFE for short, it's not as app-like the way that we think of it traditionally in the form of mobile devices, but it is application-based as far as the collaboration and the tools that are web-based on Chromebooks or on any device that you can use. And then you also need to make sure that you time it correctly. So you want to take some time in the planning for that. You want to probably do it over a break or over a summer where you have time to implement some of the training that I said would be in one of the other steps. So you also want to plan for how to roll out Google Apps for Education, or if you're going to implement Chromebooks right away, or if you're going to start with email, or if you're going to just go all in. So you want to plan for that transition, and I've worked with some schools that have done it both ways. From my experience, the schools that have gone all in have had more success in the adoption rate being much quicker and easier for everyone to get on board. They have also been, I worked with other schools who have done it where they've allowed early adopters to join the Google Apps right away and then allow others to join in as they felt comfortable, but it's gotten a bit confusing and a bit cumbersome, and the adoption rate is much slower. You can also work with an educational consulting company like Beyond Technology to help roll those out and make that transition easier for you. And then the other step is selecting a domain. So many of you probably already have a domain. For instance, at Concordia, we have the cui.edu domain, and we had that domain before we were a Google school. And when we transitioned to a Google school, we just needed to provide paperwork to prove that we own that domain. But you also need to decide whether or not you want to have a separate domain for teachers and a separate domain for students. And at Concordia, we do. Our students are at eagles.cui.edu, and the teachers or the educators are at cui.edu. And I can tell you from experience that that is not my recommendation to have two separate domains. It becomes very confusing for students when they're sharing documents with, they choose what they think is the appropriate option. They say anyone in my organization, but that organization is only their student organization, not including their teachers. So oftentimes I have to ask them to open it up to anyone with the link. So that's something that you'll want to consider, and there is some more information that you can locate to help you make that decision as well. And like I said, the transition process is probably some of the most important process, that planning that goes into that. And here are several resources. We'll provide you some PDFs of those at the end of the webinar for you to review later on. But I'll just give you a quick overview of what those are. So the first one is just some overall GAFE info. And it gives you, this is the website, so we'll provide you with a link to this website, but it talks about how it is actually completely free. The only cost that you will incur will be securing your domain, unless you decide you want some devices like Chromebooks or something like that. It talks about the collaboration, which is the biggest selling point for GAFE products on my personal beliefs. And then also you can use it on any device. So if you're already using iPads or you have desktop computers or laptops, you don't have to buy Chromebooks just to use GAFE applications. You can use it on any device. And here are some of the many applications that are available to you if you do sign up as a Google school.
Malia, I think it's important to note, not only can they, when you say any device, that includes iPads. So yes, you could, Google apps are all browser driven. So if you have a browser, a Safari, Windows Explorer, Chrome, Google Apps for Educations will work. And that goes for any device you might have.
Absolutely. They have on both Android devices, tablets, and iPads, they have apps for each of the Google apps as well. So there's a Docs app and a Sheets app, and they work very well, and I have them installed on even my smartphone. So very good point. Thank you. The next resource, and this, like I said, will be a PDF, but this is basically a resource guide for you. If you have questions about things before you go Google, here are some videos and some other articles for you to read and to learn more about. Also some stuff on Chromebooks, that type of thing. Anything else that you might have questions about, this will be a good place for you to just use as a reference. And then the final document that we're going to provide for you later on is the deployment guide. And this will, once you make that decision, and if you make that decision, this will help guide you through that process. And it is linked to each of the steps along the way, and how to configure your mail, and how to set up Google Classroom if that's something that you choose to do. So it is a very helpful resource for you. And to actually get Google Apps for Education, you have to have be a nonprofit school. So you have to locate that 501c3 paperwork. And from the schools that I've worked with, they have said that that has been the thing that has taken the longest. So if you can locate your nonprofit paperwork, that'll help smooth and move that process along pretty quickly. According to their website, they claim that the process from making the decision to start communicating with them takes about 1 to 6 weeks, depending on how quickly you turn around those emails and those things that they need. it really is only about 2 to 3 weeks, as long as, it's a good time. So the second step is as I'm continuing, is the transition, and also purchasing or transferring your domain. So if you, like I mentioned earlier, if you already own a domain, then you're just going to need to transfer that to Google, and a Google expert will work with you on that. But if you need to purchase a domain, so maybe you want to start something brand new, you have to buy that domain from a provider like GoDaddy or something, and that usually costs about $30 or $40 the first time, and then you need to renew it each year for about $10 is about the going rate. If you already own a domain and you're going to transfer it, you will need to prove to Google that you own that domain. So you'll need to make sure that you locate that paperwork as well. And then you'll also need to put some people in charge. So whether or not that will be IT people, your tech coaches, if you're the administrator, also Beyond Technology can help be your liaison to help make that transition. But you need to set some go-to people for that transition. The third step, like I mentioned, is training. Training is so very important, and oftentimes we get excited about the new tools and the new things that we're implementing that we forget that we need to train some people, and especially if we're tech-savvy people or tech leaders, it may come easy to us, but we have to remember that there are people at all levels that will be using these tools that will need some training. So like I mentioned earlier, Google offers some experts to use as references. So they will give you some initial training, and then you can take that training back to your teachers or your staff or whoever you want to be using those tools. And then something that I recommend is getting those teachers who are the early adopters on board right away and having them set as your go-to people and having them test out and see how they're working for them and their insights maybe a little bit before you roll it out for everybody. And Google also provides just a plethora of resources on their YouTube channel, anything you can find on their website, the resources that I just showed you a few minutes ago. There really are so many resources for you to help move you through this process that you won't feel alone. And the other thing is to be fully integrating those tools, and I say here lead by example, because if you're modeling, especially for you administrators, if you're modeling the use of these tools and effective practices, your teachers and your staff will see how they can use it in their classrooms or for their job to make it easier, and if by you using it will model that training and that experience for them. And also provide the ongoing training and just start at the very beginning and set some goals for where you want your faculty and staff to be, or your students. If you're a teacher, what do you want them to be using? Do you want them to be using email by the end of the first semester? Do you want them to be using their calendar, certain documents? Do you want your classrooms to go paperless in the next year or two? So think about those things, set those goals, and communicate them clearly to your staff and your faculty. And like I mentioned, your resource people are very important as part of your training. So not just having the training or the professional development, but also locating and pinpointing who those people are so that your teachers and your faculty know who they can go to if they have questions as they come up.
Malia, I want to make a point here as well, not just with Google Apps for Education, but really any technology you're bringing into the school. Rarely is the one-day in-service enough for staff. Generally, you need to look at a little more long-term professional development training to get the job done. And sometimes that means you need to find out, what level you're starting with. What we have learned is if you have 20 teachers on a campus, you're going to have all different levels, and sometimes just having one size fits all might not work. So you might want to consider an assessment first before you start the training. But some of these issues you might want to consider before you get started so that everyone's needs get met.
Very good. Thanks. Which brings us to the fourth step of the implementation. And as I mentioned in the intro, you need to consider what time of year is appropriate for that. You probably don't want to do it right before grades are due or right before some big assessments. You probably want to do it over a Christmas break, a spring break, summer break. It seems to be probably most appropriate. So make sure that it's at a time where you have enough time to make that switch and that transition, and then also enough time to provide some training for the people who will be using it. And email is a perfect place to start. That's probably the one tool that everyone already uses. And then the sites that are available, the applications that I mentioned that were on the website, the sheets and docs, those are just like your Microsoft tools that you're already using. Slides is like PowerPoint. Sites, if you choose to do some portfolios or some websites for your teachers, Sites is a great tool. And you might want to go to a Google school because you just want to become using Google Classroom, which is their very basic level of an LMS, and it makes it really easy to go paperless. Google Plus allows you to have that social networking type of feel, and depending on how you set up your security settings, you can make it private so that your teachers and your students can only communicate with each other within the organization, or you can open it up for your teachers but not your students, depending on that age level and what your goals are in that area. But as I mentioned before, as you're implementing it, you need to make sure, especially from the top down, that you are using it in every way possible, and that you are, when you're sending out agendas for your faculty meetings, that they are Google Docs and you send a link to the Google Doc, and that you ask your teachers if if they do want to print it, wait to print it until right before the meeting, because it is a live document and it does change, and those changes are live immediately. Also, use your calendar and schedule those events that are important on the calendar, and send out those calendar invites to invite parents to certain events, or post that calendar embedded on your district website. And just using it in every way that you possibly can will help give experience and show your teachers and faculty and your staff how they can use it in their classrooms. And as I mentioned earlier too, you have to keep talking about what it is that you're doing. At faculty meetings or at parent meetings, talk about how you and your teachers are using these tools in their classroom, how they're making it so easy to collaborate with each other, how you're saving money on paper, and also don't just talk about the successes, but also talk about how you might have had some obstacles, because that's real, and you learn from those failures. So make sure that you're just always talking about it, and I would suggest that at each faculty meeting to have a teacher share a real life example of what they're doing with those tools in their classroom, to help give the other teachers ideas on how to do that as well. And the last one is, sorry, Ernie, did you want to say something?
I thought you were done with this slide. One quick note, though, because you mentioned Google Classroom, and I want to just kind of talk about that for a second. That is one of the tools that Google has developed. You mentioned LMS, which stands for Learning Management System, and these are really important and are becoming more important as the classrooms become more and more digital. It is a very simple version, but a lot of schools are looking at it because it's a way to get their foot in the door to manage this digital paperwork process and to simplify the process of turning in papers or assessing students, or just collecting and keeping data organized. So all these tools are free, including Classroom. And the best thing, what I love about Google Apps for Education or Chromebooks, or really any Google tool, every time you turn it off, turn it back on, it gets better. They're constantly updated. And Classroom, for some people, is a little simple, but it's getting better. And every time that I've ever looked at it, they're adding new features. So Classroom is something that I think it's getting a lot of people interested in Google, because it does have that LMS functionality that's going to be critical for teachers moving forward. Sorry about that, Malia. Go ahead.
That's okay. And actually, really good points about the apps always getting better, especially in Classroom, because I think they just launched their beta maybe a year and a half ago. And on their beta, they have a link that says feedback, or what would you like to see. So every time you use Classroom, you can provide them with feedback and things that you want changed, or something that you wish it could do, and they do implement those, and they roll those out constantly. So it's just, they're really good at that. And my final bullet here is to bring the students in as early as possible. You want to get their hands on it students are fearless when it comes to technology, but they do need your guidance and your direction as far as how to use it and how to use it appropriately. But once you get the students in, they will start to find out other ways how they can work together and embrace the power of these tools. And the final step is model, train, repeat, and I can't emphasize these steps enough. You must use the apps as often as you possibly can in the ways that I was explaining, by providing, you know, if you're going to use slides for a training, use Google Slides. I'm using Google Slides right now. Provide those links to your teachers, or use the commenting features on the documents with your teachers if you're, you know, looking over their lesson plans and things like that. Just use them as often as you can. Modeling is so important. And make sure that you provide appropriate amount of time for that training, and not just any training, but just in time training. So if you are finding that there are a lot of questions about how to track changes, which is something that you do in Microsoft, in Google Docs, well, provide a mini training on that, or use your IT people, or ask your teachers to create some little mini videos to help train each other, or have just a YouTube channel of these just-in-time training types for your teachers to use as a resource. And again, discussing these tools and where these tools are in your faculty meetings is very important. And again, you know, Beyond Technology can help create those training modules and help with that training as well. And set a specific calendar of your trainings throughout the year. You might want to do it as often as every week, or maybe once a month, but you want to set a calendar, and you'll want to level those trainings. Some of your teachers are probably already using these tools, so they may not need your basics, but some of your teachers may have no experience with it at all. So make sure that you provide different levels of training for your teachers. And a good way to level that training is in Google Forms. It's a survey tool, so you can survey your teachers to find out what they want more of, what they need to learn more about, what their needs are. So don't forget to ask for their opinion along the way. And just repeat the process. Continue to keep modeling, train throughout. Just because you've been using the apps for a year doesn't mean that everybody knows everything about it. And as Ernie mentioned earlier, they do change and they update, and they do get better. So continue to offer that training along the way. So our last poll here is about whether or not you have a technology integration plan in place.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about this planning concept. Having Google Apps for Education is great, but it is far from the whole enchilada. There's a lot of other pieces that need to happen, a lot of things that need to happen in order for that tool to be used effectively. Malia, you spent a lot of time talking about training, professional development. That's one of the probably the most critical areas, in my opinion, that is really required, because you can't expect a teacher just to figure it all out on their own. Many of them will. Some of them it may not ever come along, unfortunately, but a critical mass of your staff is just looking for some support and training. And some of them will love video training, but most of them would prefer a real live person that they could ask questions, instructor-led type training. And another critical piece is the instructional component. You know, just having these tools and saying, teachers, here are your devices, here's your Google accounts, you know, go at it. Oftentimes that is not the effective way to go about it. Again, some of your teachers will be very able to use those tools and be effective at integrating their lesson plans, but many of them may actually need a formal process. How do you really improve the classroom with these tools? And I think the best way to explain it, you know, every school in America has technology. Every school in America has curriculum. How do the two come together, and how can these tools make that moment, that teachable moment, better? And it's such an important moment that oftentimes we don't suggest leaving it completely up to your teachers to figure out. Sometimes a technology coach, sometimes an integration specialist, someone at least in the beginning stages, should be there to help the teachers learn how to use these tools effectively. Now, what we have found is most teachers today are computer friendly. This wasn't the case, 5 years ago, especially not 10 years ago. So the good news is that teachers are ready for these things, but oftentimes they're very comfortable using it at home or in their car or walking down the street, but using these tools in the classroom is a whole new thing for them. So showing them, modeling for them, and giving them some coaching is going to be critical. We got 73 of you answered. I'm gonna go to close out this poll, and that's like 50% of you said yes, we do. That's half. Good. Many of you do not, and many of you need one. So these, planning is important, and I think Malia, you'll agree, if you fail to plan, is planning to fail? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's the old adage. Agreed.
Okay.
So, sorry, did you have something?
No.
Okay. So here's our conclusion, and really only you and your administrators can decide whether or not going Google is right for you. And really you need to focus on that why. Why do you want to go Google? Is it because you want to offer more collaboration opportunities for your students? Is it to create some paperless activities and go with a simple, easy, free LMS like Google Classroom, but make that decision and don't take it lightly. And then also you need to make sure that you plan for the how and the when and for whom will that transition take place. So make sure that you are thinking about who's going to be involved in that process right away and when are you going to do that and how are you going to do that. Remember I talked about the different domains for teachers and students and that type of thing. And as Ernie mentioned, that training piece is so very important to make sure that you have a training plan implemented, especially if you're going to roll out something brand new that your teachers or your faculty or even parents might need to be involved in this process. And make sure that you're modeling, as I write here, deliberately implement those tools. Think about how you normally do things, transfer that knowledge into how you can do it better, more effectively in Google tools. I remember a day when we would collaborate on lesson plans and we would send a Word document around and we'd have to decide which one was the latest one and what changes were added where. With Google Docs, you don't have to do that because all changes are live. All people have access to the latest and greatest version of that document that you're collaborating on, which is wonderful. And again, the administration from the top all the way down to the students, it needs to be modeled. It needs to have full buy-in from that upper level. And the parents can get involved too. They can see what their students are working on. Your students no longer can say, I left my assignment at school because, or I lost my flash drive. Well, in the cloud in Google, you can access that document from any device, anywhere, any computer. So that's no longer an excuse. They just need to log in and get access to that. So, parents might need to be involved in that as well. And then again, that training piece, so very, very important, and continue and repeat it as necessary. Just because you offered one training on how to use Google Apps for the email part doesn't mean that they won't need a refresh on that later on.
We do have a few questions, Malia. And I
Great.
would, if you're interested in asking something, now is the time. And again, on your panel, don't use the chat section, use the question section. And one of them, one of the questions was first about the results from the poll. So let me share the first one with you. And again, most of you are Microsoft people. And Microsoft are great tools. You just have to buy licenses, but although there are also free options, there's another slide that we're going to show you in a moment when we're done here. And actually, Dr. Hoffman just did a blog post comparing Google Apps for Education with Office 365 and their online tools. And so it's a very interesting analysis. I'm not going to give away the conclusion, but I'll give you the link. It's on our website if you're in a hurry, beyondteched.com. And if you look up in the top right corner, you'll see the K-12 Daily Dose, which is our blog. Click there. It's the latest blog post. And Malia, do you remember the name of it?
I think I have it up. Oh, I
We'll get
don't.
to that in a second. So there was that poll, and then there was the other poll was what's your role? So here's who's here, mostly administrators, and a lot. I think it's really important for teachers to be part of the conversation, but oftentimes some of these decisions, I feel, need to be driven by leadership, by the administration. So these are some pretty big questions and answers you have to ask and answer that have long-term ramifications on your school. And yes, the teacher should be involved, but this definitely requires leadership to do it right and to set the tone. And as Malia has been mentioning over and over again, to really demonstrate how these tools work and lead by example. Um, One of the things that we often say, technology is great, but in order for technology to truly make a difference on your campus, your teachers need confidence, they need competence, and they need content. And that should be part of this decision. It's great to have these tools in place, but how are we going to give teachers the confidence to use them? That comes from training. How are we going to make sure they're competent and know what the different tools are for? That comes from modeling. And then that content piece is so important. Are you going to have them just go and play games, or do you really want them to use the technology as a tool? So a lot of questions to ask yourself. But let's go to the questions. Malia, you ready to handle a couple questions?
I am.
Okay. Um, is Google Classroom a sufficient LMS for developing online course content for students who want to take a class online? And you're the perfect, and this is from Desiree Jessie. Jessie, Desiree, Malia's a perfect person to ask this, and she does a lot of online instruction.
Google Classroom is a very simple LMS. If you haven't been using an LMS at all before, it's a great place to start. If you're already using Google Apps for Education, it completely integrates with Google Apps really, really easily. So I do highly recommend it, maybe depending on your grade level of your students. I find that especially for elementary through middle school, it's perfect for that level of students. If you want a really deep, robust course, online course, like high school level, AP level, I don't know that you can get the level that you want from it. A tool that I would recommend for that would be Canvas, and teachers can enroll into a teacher account for free and get a Canvas account, and you can develop a pretty big, nice, as I said, robust course in Canvas would be my recommendation for that. So depending on your level, um, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's a great tool, though.
Malia, is Canvas free like Google Classroom?
Canvas is free to the individual teacher, but if a school wants to develop or implement that as their adopted LMS, there is some cost incurred with
Hmm.
that.
And I think Canvas is growing because I just saw a billboard on the freeway. They're hiring developers, so that must be a company on the move. And we're not promoting them in particular, just it came up as a question. Another question, is this webinar recorded? We could access it for someone else? Yes, we have recorded this webinar, Donna Ness, and we will send out a link to that recording. If our school, here's another question from Richard Swanson. If our school is not nonprofit, can we still use Google School? Great question.
That is a good question. I believe you can still use it, but I do believe you have to pay for it. I don't know what the cost is for that. I would need to do some more digging around, but I do believe that it is open for anyone to use. It's just free if you're a nonprofit.
Hmm, good question. Google's usually pretty inexpensive, most of the stuff they offer, so I don't
Correct.
think it's going to be ridiculously expensive. And
Mhm.
Sean Davis wanted to comment that Schoology integrates with Chromebook apps as well. And yes, Schoology is another up and comer. Actually, they've
Mhm.
been around, but they're Sean actually made a comment since I see him here that he uses Google Apps for Education for teacher effectiveness evaluations, and that from a doc that he shares with teachers, they comment something that he may have missed, then they can resolve the agree if he agrees. And he wanted to comment that the docs is a great way for evaluations. I agree.
Mhm.
Joseph Carver has a question: is there a significant disadvantage to adopting GAFE without turning over your mail server to Google? Good question.
Ooh, um, well, if you don't adopt the Gmail, and I say Gmail, but if you don't adopt the mail server, so you want to keep your mail, um, it is, I believe it's a little bit more cumbersome to do the sharing of documents, because right now when you integrate the email and all of the other apps, when you go to share and you just start typing in the first name of someone, it'll pull up all the people in your organization that have that name. So you don't have to look for that email address. So if you don't use the mail, you would need to know everyone's email address that you would want to share it with.
That's a really good observation, Malia. One of the advantages, I think one of the top advantages of using Google Apps for Education is the collaboration opportunities that it provides. Dr. Hoffman mentioned earlier about the domain issue, having two separate, one for teachers, one for students, and how if you do that, there's conflicts because then you're not able to collaborate as well. This would fall into that category as well. If Google is not supporting your email, then yeah, I think you lose a lot of the collaboration benefits. Now, if that's not critical to you, then I don't think it's going to be a big issue. But for most people, that is one of the reasons they're shifting, and that does require you to move it over there. I haven't heard any people have problems with their hosting and email services. I know there's some issues around security and privacy, but Google has been very firm on their stance that they do not share or collect data, especially student data. So something to think about, and I would definitely, that becomes more of a legal issue, and I would definitely do some more fact finding before you make that decision. Let's see, a couple other, I've heard recently, this is from Amy Wrights. Amy asks, I've heard recently about privacy issues with Google. Do you know of any issues, particularly with CIPA, CIPA, that we should keep in mind as a GAFE school?
They do have some laws and some recommendations in place, and I don't know them. I can't quote them verbatim, but I do know that I believe if it's students under 14 years old, that you need to have stricter security settings as far as only allowing certain sharing privileges for people within the organization. I don't know of any specific security breaches, but that might be a case where for certain levels of students, you might want to have to not have like the Google Plus, the social networking options, or the Google Sites where it's sort of an open website. Those options. As far as anything else, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Real good. Let's see, where'd that question go? Let's see. I got that one from Desiree. There was a question here that was actually a very good one. If you, Thomas, Thomas Rivera, Thomas is using an LMS already. If you're already a school with an LMS, how much of a downgrade is Google Classroom? And I think that's dependent on what you're currently using. If you could share that information, if you share what LMS are you using, Thomas? Are there any that you think are inferior to Google Classroom, Aaliyah?
Well, so like as I mentioned, it's a very basic LMS, and actually Google Classroom is careful not to even call it an LMS because it doesn't have all of the options.
Okay.
But just because you're already using our LMS doesn't mean that you shouldn't use Google Apps for Education. For instance, at Concordia, we use Blackboard as our LMS, and we do use all the other Google Apps for Education. And we have Google Classroom open as well because I teach in the educational technology department, so we use that and we explore that with our current students. I would say that if you're already using an LMS, depending on what that is, if it's something like Canvas or Blackboard or maybe even Moodle, you probably have a better version of what Google Classroom currently is. The aspect that I like about Google Classroom is that it's very easy for students to turn in and grade assignments and that sort of thing. However, in my Blackboard courses that I design and teach, I fully integrate all the Google Docs anyway, and I just ask my students to provide a link for me to their Google Docs when they're handing in assignments. So rather than an upload, they just put a link in the comment box and I have access to their assignments. So just because you're already using a good LMS doesn't mean that should be a reason why you wouldn't go to Google.
Yeah, and I have learned just from experience, some teachers prefer Google because of its simplicity. Whereas
Mhm.
things like, it looks like Tomas is using Blackboard with Moodle, that's a little more sophisticated environment. Probably has way more features and options and flexibility, but there's also a longer or a bigger learning curve for your teachers. So in
Yeah.
that regard, I think it depends on your audience. Are your teachers, you're an elementary school that just gets started, or are you advanced university with highly qualified professors? Well, those are some of the questions you need to ask. And he asked if it Tomas asked, does it integrate with Turnitin.com?
Um, that I don't believe so.
As of
I
right now. And again,
Yeah, as of right now, and that could be something that you could ask for feedback or ask
yeah,
for an improvement on. But yeah, I don't believe that it has a fully integrated feature.
yeah.
I do believe that you can add additional applications to it, um, sim similar to the way Edmodo works, if you're familiar with
Okay.
that tool.
Yeah, and actually, Sean had a comment. Someone was asking about email earlier. You can disable the email element, but will need to create logins for students. Say you do not want students to have email, you could also block out outside communications from strangers to protect your students. So it sounds like
Yeah,
Sean and Tomas have a lot of background in this area and maybe a good
good.
resource. And Tomas actually gave us a link to an Ed Week article that he suggests we have a look at.
Awesome.
Anyway, Amelia, I think that's it for the questions. If there's any last ones, now it's now or never. I did want to say that this presentation, this webinar, is being conducted at the end of 2015, almost into 2016. And I want to give that. Usually I don't put a date on webinars, so I want them to be good forever. But especially when it comes to Google tools, they're constantly updating their tools. So this information is good for now, but if you are seriously considering these moves and have some more questions, contact us first so we can make sure you have the latest and greatest information. And this is a good thing. The technology should advance. It should get easier. It should have more features. And Google is great about doing that. So don't look at that as a negative. Look at it as a positive. As classrooms evolve, as teachers and students get more sophisticated, the tools will come right along with them, and Google's one of the leaders in that area. I think we have a final question from Barbara Schaffner. Classroom management, do you know, or Land School have the ability to monitor students? Land School, I would assume so.
I'm not familiar with Land School.
Well, Sean or Thomas will give us an answer. If I know Land School, uh, yeah, Land School, I think just works on your network. I don't think it has anything to do with Google Apps. Anything that your students are looking at,
Okay.
Land
Yeah.
School will
Then
capture.
yes.
Yeah, Land School will
hmm
capture all of that.
I mean, if you can see what web page they're looking at, then you can see what they're working on in
Yeah.
Google
Yeah,
Apps.
see, Tomas said, yes, it's local. Land School, yeah, if it's local, will work fine. And then Sean said, more comments, before anyone gives students a device that is connected to the internet, they need to make sure they have a good content filter. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Well, I got way more questions.
Okay.
uh, and then let's see. Yeah, that was it. Does Google do the same monitor ability? When you talk monitor, you talk about content filtering monitoring. Does Google do the same monitor? Oh, are you talking, Barbara? If you're talking about does it monitor like Land School? No, they're two different technologies.
Mhm.
Um, and Sean says he uses Open DNS. I mean, we could go on and on here. Oh wait, Kathy, here's a new question. What machines are most durable for using Google Apps? Well, that's a really big question right there. Depends who you're talking to. I do know that Lenovo makes some really high-end titanium. I've heard of cars running over laptops and they still turn on. Lenovo's also making Chromebooks these days. That's a question for your technology vendors. If you want to contact me offline, Kathy, we have some suggestions there. But anyway, I wanted to get back go back to the presentation, Malia, if you don't mind.
Sure.
there's the contact information for us if you want to do a quick screen capture on that, or a snip. So if you want to reach out to either of us, feel free. And then I wanted to show you real quick, Malia, if you can go to that last slide, that we do have that debate on Google Apps for Education versus Office 365. Now, most of you are Microsoft people, so I would love your feedback. Dr. Hoffman has done her analysis and given us her opinion. You know, her opinion might be different than my opinion. It might be different than Susie's opinion. I want to know what your opinion is. If you can, please go to the K-12 Daily Dose. You can find it through beyondteched.com. The word beyond tech, like technology, ed, like education.com. You can see it there on your screen. Up in the right corner, click on the Daily Dose. Subscribe, please, and comment. This is an open debate right now because, as she mentions, I'm not going to again give her conclusion away, but Google has been at this cloud-based tools service, the software as a service thing, longer than Microsoft. Microsoft's a little late to the game, but you can't. Microsoft is a powerful entity and they do great stuff. So this is a great battle, and the winner of this battle is us, the consumer, the educator that wants to use these tools, because you can't argue it's free, and these things are getting great, and they're available from your phone to your laptop to eventually in your car. I'm going to put it out there. Eventually you're going to see this stuff from your car. It's all coming together, but these two giants in the technology industry are battling it out, and we are the beneficiaries of that. So have a look at it. It sounds like Thomas also likes Lenovo. Well, real good, guys. So thank you. Have a look at the blog, beyondteched.com. Go to the K-12 Daily Dose. And if that's it, I think we've said it all. Malia, are you good? Are you done? Anything else? Final comments?
I am done. Thank you very much for coming, and let me know if you have any questions. I left my contact information on that other slide, and you can connect with me on Twitter or Google Plus as well if you want to share articles or resources.
Fantastic. Thank you for your expertise. We do appreciate it. And folks, thank you for joining in. And I will make this video available to all of you, so please forward it to your friends and relatives. It'd be some nice viewing over the holidays. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. We appreciate your time.